Hi, everyone. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have Jenny Calcoen, the CEO of Inner Earthquake. Inner Earthquake is a consulting and coaching practice. She works with Gen X women who have gone through an inner earthquake and provides them with the knowledge and the practical tools to stop feeling confused and powerless so that we can all feel vibrantly alive no matter what happens in life. Welcome to the EO Wonder podcast, Jenny.
Thank you for having me.
So, I often like to start our interviews with how you got to where you're got or how did you get here? You're the CEO and founder of Inner Earthquake. What led you to being the CEO to help Gen Xers live a vibrant life?
Yeah, so there's different answers, right? Like I would argue in a way this has been the path that my whole life has led me to. But more recently, I left my corporate career 8 years ago to focus on really how could I be in service. And as I started working with women, my clients would bring me the same issues. They might be going through different circumstances, but the effect on the inside was the same. And so that's where I really started to see, or I started to focus on this inner earthquake. But yes, being in service and while doing your own inner work, I think that's really why we're all here.
So,
So,
you have a corporate career that spans 26 years in 6 countries. Tell us a little bit more about your background.
yeah, so I was born and raised in Belgium. And when I was 22 years old, I moved and ended up living in different European countries as I was building my corporate career. So every time I moved, which initially was because the person I was married to back then moved for work. And so I followed along and built my own career and ended up being, in corporate leadership. And that was a lot of fun. And it requires a lot of dedication. And I ended up burning myself out completely because it was 24/7 dedication. And the job was before and ahead of anything or anyone else, including myself. So, yeah, that was how that came to an end. I chose to do something different. And I had been coaching as a way to be a better leader. And I thought, maybe I can just do that thing that really makes me happy and that really energizes me rather than drains me of all energy. And at the same time, left Europe to move to Southern California because that seemed like a really lovely place to land.
So, you left a totally different continent to come here to California. How has it been so far?
Well, it's been wonderful. Yes, to be a business owner and to be an entrepreneur and doing the work that I had done for many, many years for other people and now doing it for myself and deciding how I want to build my business. It's just really joyful. Like there is no longer a separation between me, Jenny, the person, and the work that I do. And I find it joyful and not a burden at all. I like what I do. I like the people that I work with. And yeah, I feel very blessed and doing it in Southern California. I mean, really, what is not to like?
So, you named your company Inner Earthquake. What was your inner earthquake?
Well, there've been several. And so I would definitely say that the last one was, changing from being a corporate leader to, you know, being a business owner and an entrepreneur in California. That was definitely the last one. And I tell this story of I didn't realize how attached I had become to that identity of corporate leader because it had been part of my life for so long. And I remember being in a mobile phone store, just trying to get a cell phone. And the person who was explaining the plans to me, and I kind of had this experience of like, I really don't understand how this works because it's slightly different in Europe. And it was a humbling moment because a part of me felt like, do you know who I am? I sign off on millions, right? And so it was really humbling. And that was sort of a recognition of like, oh, it really something that I was attached to that I didn't even realize. So that was a little inner earthquake. And there's been several. And actually statistics tell us that by the time that women reach midlife, on average, we've experienced 5 major life changes. And so some people will say, yes, I've experienced more than 5. So we've all had these experiences, and it's just a matter of how we deal with them, really.
So was there besides burnout, was there another catalyst that made you go from, I guess, London? Was that it? To
Yes.
California?
I mean, it was the realization that here I was, at the pinnacle of my career, really in a job that was really satisfying, and it had all the things. I had, the team and the office and the privileges and you know the position and the title and the income. And there was still something inside of me that thought, this just doesn't feel like fulfilling one's purpose. Like, this feels empty. Like, I think somewhere inside or I can only speak for myself, I thought, like, well, maybe when I get there, things will feel differently. And it turns out that they don't, because you still take yourself with you, right? And so there wasn't a sense of personal fulfillment. Like, I didn't feel like I had the impact on the world that I thought I could have and that I dreamed of having. And so it was burnout. It was a sense of like, is this it? Yeah. And there were sad realizations along the line. Like, one experience was, an experience where I got home, and my husband had injured himself during the day. It turned out that he had been to the hospital and had to have a plastic surgeon, attach a finger. And I was just like, what, why didn't you let me know? And he was like, oh, I know you're busy at work. And in a way that broke my heart, because I thought, well, how does he not know that he's the most important person in my life? And the reality was, well, because my job came before everything in my life. So there's these milestones along the way that really pointed towards the same thing. And I thought, I don't want to continue living like this.
So did it mean, because moving from a different continent to a new place like California is like starting off with a blank slate. Was that helpful to do that? And would you advise people like who you're coaching to do that, to start off with a clean slate?
Starting out with a clean slate, metaphorically, I think, would be something that is helpful. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it physically. I mean, it depends on anyone's circumstances. I had, obviously moved several times, and I quite like experiencing, different cultures and different languages. And so there were a lot of things that were great about it. Like you say, it's a clean slate. I was living 10 minutes away from the ocean. I mean, like, all of that was just wonderful. Like, there was definitely a honeymoon period. And there were, also challenges with that, right? Like, it was learning a whole new how things are done. Like, how do I even, register a business, right? Like, everything was just brand new. And so the learning curve was definitely very steep. And I would say, because of the time difference with Europe, all of a sudden, people that I was very close to, that I was still in touch with, like colleagues or friends, or were now 8, 9, 10 hours away. So it wasn't just like I could pick up the phone and say, hey, can we chat? And that felt a little bit isolating. But I will say that the good thing about that was that it made me go out and meet everyone I could meet in my community. So, it's an individual consideration. Like, what, you need to really be aware of what the pros and the cons are, and then just go for it. Like, once you make the decision, then, be all in and go for it.
And I love that your name of your company is Earthquake because there's a lot of earthquakes here in California. Is
Yes.
that an
Yes.
appropriate metaphor?
Yes. I mean, I didn't come up with it, I don't think, because of California, but I kept seeing, I was speaking with, as I said before, with women going through very, very different circumstances. So they might be going through a divorce or a planned or unplanned job change or empty nest, or but it caused sort of the same sense of my world has been turned upside down on the inside. So that's, I don't claim to have invented the term. I may have read it somewhere, but that's how I identified, oh, it's really an inner earthquake. And then when I started talking in those terms, I very often would get the reaction of, I would say 90% of women respond by saying, oh, I know, like this is definitely something I've experienced, or my friend is going through something. And so it seems to hit a nerve with people where it really identifies what is going on for them on the inside.
Do most people know that they're going through an inner earthquake, or are they too busy experiencing it to actually have that awareness? And do they sometimes hire you to be able to shed light on their issue, not issues, but their challenges or their conflicts with themselves, incoherence, etc.?
Yeah, I would say very often when people hear me say inner earthquake, they're like, oh, that's a great way of describing it. And they haven't had the words to describe maybe what they've gone through. And yes, people do hire me. They hire me when they're sort of in the space of like, okay, what now? And what's next? And where do I even start? So they might initially sometimes work with a therapist. They might still be working with a therapist when they come to me, but now they're sort of oriented towards, okay, so I've gone through this thing, and now what? Now what do I do? Yeah.
What's the difference with someone working with a psychotherapist and someone working with you?
Yeah. I think that's a really important distinction that in the coaching industry, I don't think that coaches are always aware of this. And so that can really harm people, when we're working in a space that really we shouldn't be working in. So I really don't work with people in trauma, for example. I use trauma informed presence practices, but I do not work with people who are actively in experiencing trauma. So I would say that is where therapy comes in. It's working with people who are traumatized, who are really looking at what are these patterns that keep repeating and why do they keep repeating. And in the work that I do, we're looking at mindset, at presence practices, mindfulness practices. So that's a different orientation. And although we go deep, we do examine like, who are you and who do you want to be and where do you want to go? It is not therapy. And yeah, it's really important that we make that distinction.
Yeah, I like to say that a lot of times if you're wanting a therapist, it's really to understand why something happened to you. And also it's really looking backwards. And when you
Yeah.
do hire a
Yeah.
coach, someone like you, you're really wanting to move your life forward. And you
Yes.
share the tools, the how. So with therapy, you're thinking about the why, and with coaching, you are really thinking about the how.
Yeah.
Now that you have all this information about yourself, what are you most interested in focusing on? And
Yes.
what I love about your practice is the mindfulness aspect of it. I also love mindfulness. Share a little bit more about how you bring these practices of mindfulness into your practice.
Mm. Yes. So I would say that most of us navigate life on autopilot. And that can be very useful when you're driving your car, that you don't actually consciously have to remember every single action that you take to drive your car. It is not so great when we live our lives on autopilot. And so that's when we hear things like, oh my gosh, it's almost the end of the year, or I can't believe it's spring again. I've lost, track of time. So that's sort of an indication of where we are in the society. We're very, very busy with our to-do lists and all the many things that we need to accomplish and do, go, go, go. And then when something happens, our world gets turned upside down, we are rather violently, in a way, propelled into the present moment. And again, most of us haven't learned the tools to actually be with the present moment and feel all of our feelings, so to speak. And when we're going through an inner earthquake, feeling all your feelings can be really scary, and it can be really, the fear of the pain is very real. And so people really want to get out of the moment. They really just want to escape, like, I don't want to feel this pain. So what mindfulness really helps you to do is to become present to the present moment. And the best way I have found to do that is to come back to your senses. So the way we experience the world is really through our senses, first of all, and then we tend to sort of put it through the meaning-making machine, that is our mind. But when we learn that we can come into the present moment by experiencing our senses and remaining there, that is the beauty of a mindfulness practice or present moment practice, is that we can be in this moment. And in this moment, I feel sad in this moment. Oh, there's a flutter in my belly in this moment, right? So every moment is different. There is no such thing as this big lump that is called pain. So it's really helpful to become present in each moment. And what we can do there is then cultivate this emotional resilience so that when the next inner earthquake comes along, we don't have to power through it. We don't have to white knuckle it. We can know that we're okay no matter what, simply through our practice.
And I love John Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness, which is really to look at what's happening with non-judgment,
Yes.
and with this level of compassion, because a lot of times people think mindfulness is just like, oh, well, I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to numb myself. I'm just not going to think about it. But what mindfulness also invites you to do is to really feel it, but without judgment. Like you just said, I'm feeling
Yeah.
sad right now. I feel I'm not, if you're comparing yourself to someone. I'm not feeling it as good as this person. If people are scrolling through social media, look at what this person did, and being able to have that acceptance and appreciation of that feeling right there and then, because then you can move forward.
Yeah. And also that leads us to the realization that there is really no good and bad, that's just really a construct. We have experiences, and they might be helpful experiences or unhelpful experiences. They're not positive or negative or good or bad. That's just a label that we put on things. And when we learn to take those labels away, like you say, without judgment and also without attachment, really, it's just more helpful. It's more helpful to be with ourselves and be in this world.
And in this world right now, we can see, there's so much international turmoil that's happening, and people are still feeling the after effects of the pandemic with this mental health crisis. What type of advice would you give to someone who may be feeling a little bit unstable, having their own inner earthquake with all the day-to-day things that are happening?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to talk about is that you're not broken and that there's nothing wrong with you, right? Very often we get those messages from the outside world. And again, that is not a really helpful path to take. So self-compassion is so critical, because until we know to have compassion for ourselves, we can really not have it for other people and have it in the world. So I think that's critical, practicing self-compassion. Like I am a flawed human being, and I'm trying to do the best that I can. And okay, that wasn't very skillful, maybe what I did. And now I know better, and I can be better, right? And it's not even about better, right? That word is not actually a helpful word, better, but what would be helpful in my growth as a human being and in my role as a being part of the human beings, around me? And how can I spread that compassion, kindness, love? That's really where it starts for me.
And I also do love that word that you used earlier, which is skillful, because I do believe that there are some things that when we start observing ourselves, there are certain things that we do that can lead to results that we want
Mm.
and results that we don't want, because I know that we
Mhm.
don't really want to say this is good or this is bad. There are skillful ways that you can manage
Yeah.
whether or not it's repairing a relationship or learning how to talk to your teenage child or learning how to be an empty nester. There's definitely ways that we can be more skillful.
Yeah. Yes, and as you say, like language is very important. So, what is skillful and what are the skills that I would like to develop? It's very important that we look at behavior as, okay, these are skills or this is skillful, this is helpful, rather than I saying I am angry is saying my state of being is angry, and that is not true. Angry is a feeling, it's an emotion. Okay, I am feeling angry. That maybe sounds like a small distinction, but it's a world of difference. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge difference because when you're saying I am, it's just like you're not different, but you're the one actually observing your behavior at that time. I remember when I was meditating, I would just like, yeah, I meditate. And then I changed to I am a meditator because that's really how I identify myself. Just probably the same thing as like I work out, or you can just say I'm an athlete. But if you start going down sort of that negative path where you're like, I am terrible, I am an imposter, like you could just see how you're going to embody that being, which isn't really that helpful.
Yes. It's discernment is very important, right? Discernment in our language, discernment in our actions. Our words have consequences, our actions have consequences, our beliefs have consequences. And actually, it's interesting when you say I am a meditator, right? There is actually nothing more natural than being with yourself, right? And somehow we've turned meditation into another sort of performative thing that we do. It's sort of like, and I have to have these clothes and I have to sit a certain way. And it's not necessary at all. In fact, I would say again, like the majority of my clients come to me and say, "Oh, I could never meditate." Like they think they are uniquely the worst person in the world for meditation and they can't possibly meditate. And that's just not true, right? And they might come with preconceived notions about, oh, my mind is crazy, monkey mind is crazy, and I can never stop it. I will never learn to stop. And it's like, spoiler alert, you'll never be able to stop it. It's just how you build a different relationship with your thoughts. So everybody can meditate because it's really about being with yourself, big capital S, right?
Yeah, I think that is so interesting because you're absolutely right. When people say, like, I hear that all the time, I could never meditate. But the fact that they're saying I can never meditate, they're already observing themselves in a certain way, like,
Mhm.
which is basically what meditation is really about is awareness. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm aware that I cannot, and then that's their belief system. So I think that's so interesting. So you talk a lot about being kind is a strength in business and it's not a weakness and it's not a soft skill. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Mm. Yes, what I learned in my journey in corporate and sort of the second half was sort of in the finance world, and it was a very, let's say, left brain oriented world. And at first I found myself actually being really unhappy trying to adapt who I was to what I was seeing leadership being demonstrated as. And it took me a while to realize that actually my type of leadership was very effective and it was effective for me. And my type of leadership was, with kindness and having people's backs. And it meant, yes, it sometimes meant that when I had one-on-ones with my direct reports, that I would hear about their personal lives and difficult things that were going on. And it allowed me to keep on cultivate that compassion and realize that, yes, they are employees and they are human beings, and we can work together with this. There is no sense in me trying to force a behavior out of them when I know that there's something important going on in their lives. Like, the outcome will not be good for anybody. So if I can help them here, that just creates a beautiful connection and a symbiotic relationship rather than I am telling you what to do. So that is how I feel that kindness is not actually a soft skill at all. It requires mastery, right? It requires mastery, not to manipulate, as left brain leadership very often demonstrates, but to build connection and build communication, models of communication that are, we're all human beings in, sharing a professional context, and we're still human beings. People have, up days and down days and things that are going on with their families. So yeah, that's how I see kindness as a strength.
And I think kindness, not to only others, earlier you were alluding to self compassion, also kindness to ourselves. I think it probably
Yeah.
starts there, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all starts with ourselves, right? The way we love ourselves, the way we are kind to ourselves, the way we have compassion for ourselves is the basic foundation for anything else, because we cannot be kind or compassionate or love somebody else if we don't do that with ourselves.
Yeah, so it starts with that first practice. And I'm sure you've read Tara Brach's book, Radical Acceptance, and Kristen Neff's book, on fierce self-compassion. I think it's definitely something that's missing, with Gen Xers, because we just sort of feel like we can just tough it out, like
Yeah.
describe like why do you want to work with Gen Xers? How are they different from everyone else?
Well, I'm a Gen Xer, right? And so I
So am
tend
I.
to see women in midlife, so as I am, in that space of they've gone through major life events, and what they've done is they've powered through, and eventually that takes its toll when we go sometimes for years and years and years, decades, without actually acknowledging something happened, it affected me, it affected me in this or that way, and actually dealing with that. They then end up in a space where they feel numb, they don't feel connected to themselves. They might not use those words, but they'll say, like, I don't even remember what I used to like, or I don't even know what I like to eat right now, or like they feel completely lost. And so I really enjoy working with women who are in that space, because I know that they've simply forgotten who they are. They've simply disconnected from themselves. And so I can walk alongside them, hold their hands for a little while until, until the spark is there, and you literally see that happen in someone when they reconnect with themselves and they embody their essence again. It's like, okay, here we are. You just needed a little bit of space and time for yourself in a safe place, non-judgmental, no shaming, to experiment and to sort of reconnect with yourself. And so I really, really enjoy that. I think in a way it's sacred. It's sacred to be let in and to be able to witness someone who goes through that journey. And so it's extremely fulfilling and nourishing to me.
What are you looking forward to in the year?
Mm. Well, doing more of what I'm doing, really. I enjoy working with women the women who are in the right place and it's the right fit for us to work together. So I want to do more of that. And then I would say, especially as entrepreneurs and as we grow our businesses, I have found also in the past that sometimes we can get stuck in terms of like, this is what I'm trying to achieve, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And I think personally, you can never set a big enough goal. So I would always say set a goal that seems just beyond your stretch, because you're probably going to reach it, or even if you fall short a little bit, we can accomplish more than we think we can. And so don't hold back. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of not achieving the numbers. Focus on, well, if I think it's impossible to reach this number, what if you fell short 20% of that impossible number, right? That would still be amazing. So, so that is where I focus. I don't want to get stuck on a specific goal, because I know that the universe is always changing. We are changing, human beings are changing, and really keep going forward, I think is the message for me.
Yeah, and there's still so much more, you work with people who are in midlife, but if you take a look at J.Lo, she's in midlife.
Yeah,
Jennifer
exactly.
Aniston, it's
That's
it's
right.
almost just like 50 is like the new 30, I
Yeah.
guess because of how someone takes care of themselves, and there's still
Hmm.
so many decades left. And rather
Yes.
than just thinking at our midlife as a time to slow down, this is the time where we actually have the time. Like you said, empty nesters, you have the time to be able to
Hmm.
do these big, big things.
And in a way, you know so much more about who you are now, and what you will not accept anymore. That makes life in a way very, very, or much easier, right? Because the seeking that we did maybe in our 20s and our 30s, and we're beyond that now, and we've reached a certain space of, I would say even wisdom to share, and there's just not that same fear anymore. And I mean, the world is our oyster, right? I mean, literally, we can do whatever we set our minds to. And we may have been taught that, oh, by 50, you should be looking forward to retiring. And I see so many women in midlife who are like, this is their second career, their third career, or their professional lives, and they're changing their lives completely in a way that is just so inspiring to me every day.
Thank you so much for all that you're sharing. I'd also love to know how you keep inspired. Like, do you listen to different podcasts? Do you work out? Like, what's your routine to stay
Mhm.
motivated?
Yeah. And I think it's many different things, right? It's never one thing. It's a combination of keep on doing the same thing. So it's like definitely it's a mindfulness practice for me, and I'm a practicing Buddhist, so that's important to me. It's also, moving my body, making sure that I drink enough water, that these might all seem like such small things, and they matter so much. It's, yes, I will listen to podcasts, but I will also take time to meet with friends and spend quality time with friends. Like this week, I'm, flying to Denver to spend some time with a friend, and that's really, really soul nourishing to me. So, whatever you need to do, whether it's reading a book or, know thyself and know what nourishes you. And I think the important thing is also to pick things that don't necessarily have a determined outcome. When I do this, I get this. No, sometimes it's literally like, can you sit down on a bench in a park and feel the sun on your skin, and the sort of breeze on your arms, and hear the bird song? Can you allow yourself to do that, or do you sit on that bench and start making phone calls because there needs to be an outcome. So whatever nourishes you, do that and do a lot of it.
Well, that is wonderful parting advice. I also am a Buddhist. Do you go to Deer Park Monastery, Thich Nhat Hanh's? It's in
I,
Escondido, in
I
California.
haven't. I
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. What
I
type
haven't
of
yet.
Buddhist are you?
Yeah, I'm part of an order called Triratna. So the three, Dharma, Buddha, Sangha, and they're an order that was started by a British man who had spent decades with teachers in India and who came back to the UK and wanted to find a way for Westerners to practice Buddhist principles in a Western world, in the ways that we live in cities and with very busy lives. And so I came across them because I think I saw that they were teaching a meditation course. And as I was taking the course, it felt like I have had this experience of what they were already teaching. So it was more of oh, they're I'm finding an explanation for the experience that I've already had or the experiences I've already had. So it's yeah, it's been wonderful for me. And even though they're based in the UK, one good thing out of the pandemic is that everybody went online. So I found my community back, even though they're in London, we can connect online. And so, yeah,
Ah,
that's my order.
that's wonderful to talk to someone else who's, a fellow Buddhist practitioner. But what's really interesting, I know that the Buddha didn't really set out to make it a religion. He really,
That's right.
one of his pieces of advice was try it out for yourself. See
Yeah.
what your own voice of wisdom is saying. Try it out, like don't have
Mhm.
to follow exactly what I'm saying. And so I think that's what you're alluding to, is just like this feels familiar. This level of
Yeah.
presence feels familiar. And that's why
Yeah.
I think I love it so much, because I think of it more as spiritual rather than religious.
Yeah, and to me, it's not a religion, it's a philosophy, right? It's a way of living. It's like there is no deity to worship. There's a teacher, but there's no deity to worship or there's no central theme. The central theme is, don't get too attached to the things that we all get attached to. Be kind to each other, be mindful of your experience in every moment. Those seem like very sort of generic principles to adopt in life.
And one I love too is also do not cause harm. So
Yeah,
whenever
yeah,
I'm thinking, will that cause harm? Let's not do that.
that's right. Yeah,
Well, thank you
yeah.
so much for spending so much time with us talking about how we can go beyond our inner earthquake. You're such a wonderful example. You have someone who was in corporate leadership, working at huge companies like IBM,
Mhm.
in roles where women really looked up to now coming back into service and really helping women entrepreneurs, Gen Xers, to be able to live a more vibrant and fulfilled life. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.